Imagine opening your eyes. Cold, the smell of rot, screams behind the wall. You're not in a movie. You're not in a game. You're in the Middle Ages. And you have only one question. Will you survive until tomorrow? We like to think of the Middle Ages as a time of noble knights, mighty castles, and glorious battles. Movies show us shining armor. Games give us heroes with swords. Books talk about honor, glory, and destiny. But the real Middle Ages were nothing like the legend. This was an era where most people never saw clean water, where disease killed faster than steel, and where fear was part of everyday life. Let's be honest. If you were born in the Middle Ages, you wouldn't be a king. You wouldn't be a knight. You wouldn't even be a wealthy merchant with more than a 90% chance. You would be a peasant, a person whose life did not truly belong to them. You wake up before sunrise, not because you want to, but because survival demands it. Your bed is straw. Your home is a wooden hut with a leaking roof. In winter, the cold crawls inside. In summer, damp air, insects, and rats surround you. You eat the same food every day. Bread, sometimes a thin soup. Meat is a luxury you may taste only a few times in your entire life. And if the harvest fails, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you die. But the worst part is this. You have no choice. You can't leave. You can't change your life. You can't say no. You belong to the land. And the land belongs to the Lord. Knights? Yes, they exist, but not as noble heroes from stories. They are armed men trained for violence, who can take your food, punish you, or kill you, and face no consequences. Honor? Honor was not for everyone. It was a privilege of the few. Now add one more thing. You live in a world where any day can be your last. There is no real medicine, no painkillers, no understanding of how the human body works. A small wound can mean death. A toothache can become torture. An infection is a sentence. Most people die at 30 or 40 years old, and that is considered normal. And all of this happens under constant fear. Fear of war, fear of famine, fear of God. From childhood, you are told, if you doubt, you sin. If you ask questions, you are dangerous. If you don't believe, you are an enemy. The Middle Ages were not a fairy tale. They were not romantic. They were a test of survival. And in the next part, we will go even deeper into daily life, diseases, punishments, and horrors people rarely talk about. Because real history is far more terrifying than any legend. If you survived childhood in the Middle Ages, you were already lucky, because many didn't. Infant mortality was brutal. One infection, one fever, one bad winter, and a child was gone. Life did not begin with hope. It began with risk. Every single day was physical labor. From sunrise to sunset, your body was your only tool. You plowed fields with simple wooden tools. You carried stones. You harvested crops by hand. Rest was rare. Exhaustion was normal. Your body aged fast. At 20, you already felt old. At 30, you were considered worn out. Pain was not treated. It was endured. Cleanliness was almost non-existent. Bathing was rare. Water was often dirty. Waste flowed through streets or was dumped nearby. Rats lived close to people. Insects crawled everywhere. Disease spread silently. People didn't know about bacteria. They didn't understand infection. They blamed demons, curses, or God's punishment. Medical care as we know it did not exist. If you broke a bone, it might never heal properly. If you got an infection, there was no cure. Bloodletting was common. Herbs were used blindly. Prayers replaced science. Sometimes treatment killed faster than the illness. Justice was not fair. Laws were harsh and uneven. Punishments were public. Stealing food could cost you a hand. Speaking against authority could cost your life. Trials were short. Evidence was optional. Confessions were often forced. Fear kept people obedient. And above all, there was the church. Religion controlled every aspect of life. You were told what to believe, how to live, what to fear. Questioning doctrine was dangerous. Thinking differently could mark you as a heretic. Hell was described in detail. Salvation was promised only through obedience. Faith was not comfort. It was control. War was constant. Even if you never fought, war found you. Armies marched through villages. They took food. They took animals. Sometimes they took lives. You had no protection, no rights, no escape. A war between kings was paid for by peasants. Death was everywhere. You saw it often. You got used to it. Family members, neighbors, children. Funerals were simple. Grief was short. Life had to continue. Because if you stopped, you starved. The Middle Ages were not just hard. They were unforgiving. They tested the human body. They crushed the human spirit. And yet, people survived. In the next and final part, we'll ask the most important question. Why do we still romanticize this era? Why do we admire it, despite the suffering? And what did the Middle Ages leave behind that still shapes our world today? Because the true legacy of this time is not castles or knights. It is the cost humanity paid to move forward. By the end of the Middle Ages, violence had become routine. War was no longer an exception. It was a constant background noise of life. Kings fought for land, titles, and pride. Nobles chased power and glory. But the ones who paid the price were always the same. The peasants. Armies didn't just fight each other. They moved through villages like storms. They burned homes. They stole food. They took livestock. If you resisted, you died. If you fled, you starved. There was no safe side in war, only survival. Then came fear with a different face. Heresy, witchcraft, sin. The church and authorities searched for enemies within. Anyone could be accused. A strange belief, a different opinion, a neighbor's suspicion. Truth didn't matter. Confession did. Fear kept society obedient. And yet, centuries later, we remember this era differently. We remember castles, not hunger. Knights, not corpses. Honor, not oppression. Why? Because stories are easier than truth. Because legends are comforting. Because suffering is harder to face. But the Middle Ages were not meaningless. Out of pain came change. People questioned power. Knowledge slowly returned. The foundations of modern law, science, and society were laid. Progress was slow, but it was paid for with lives. The Middle Ages were not a golden age. They were a bridge, a brutal, dark bridge, between the ancient world and the modern one. So the next time you see a knight in shining armor, remember the people beneath the armor, the farmers, the children, the forgotten. History is not just what we admire. It is what we survived.